Right. I'd like to begin by welcoming everyone to this meeting of the Assets and Procurement Committee here at New Shire Hall and everyone watching via YouTube. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or to vibrate while the meeting is taking place? Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit along this side of the building and at the back there, and assemble in the car park. The closest fire escape is through the middle doors on my left. Well, I've said that already. Okay, so our first item is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, we have two apologies. The first is from Councillor Ricky Ioannidis. The second is from Councillor Colin Galbraith, with Councillor John Wells substituting.
And I think Adam would like to apologise for lateness. He's on his way.
Does any member have any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Nope. Okay. So I think we'll move on now to the minutes and action log. We are being asked to approve the minutes of the committee meeting held on the 10th of June, 2025 as an accurate record. If any committee member wants to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes, please let me know. No. So I see no objections. We'll take that as carried unanimously. So we have an action log. Do officers have any updates?
Yes, we do have an update to action number 69, the employee benefits contract. A procurement exercise took place over the summer months, and the council is in the process of awarding the contract to a managed service provider for the provision of a benefits portal offering discounts across a range of retailers, a car lease scheme, and loans and savings. The new contract will be effective from the 1st of November 2025, and officers are liaising with Pathfinder Legal to finalize the contract and call-off terms. Officers intended to include the provision of a cycle to work scheme, but have since sought approval to direct award to Halfords via the ESPO framework in order to realize some financial benefits which can only be obtained through contracting directly. Being able to realize financial benefits from the contract was specifically requested by members at the committee meeting in October 2024.
Thank you, Jenna. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, so we therefore note the action log. Thank you. Right, we have no petitions or public questions. Right. So then, may I remind members now that Appendix 1 to this report is exempt, and we will need to move into confidential session if members wish to discuss it. I mean, I would hope that we can do most of the discussion in public, and if you really want to talk about the commercial details, then we can do that. But I'm sure we can manage to have a good discussion without that. Right, so can I ask Chris Ramsbottom, Service Director of Property, assisted by Mark Freer, Principal Surveyor, to present this report, which is on page 15 of your agenda pack. And by the way, when I'm talking about pages in our agenda pack, I mean the confidential agenda pack, just to avoid confusion. Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee members. I'm Chris Ramsbottom, Service Director for Property, and Mark Freer is the Chartered Estate Surveyor who has managed this disposal. The report considers the freehold disposal of land at Barker's Lane in March, which forms part of the Neil Wade Academy School site. The Council's disposal policy requires A&P Committee approval for the disposal of any land or property where the consideration is greater than £500,000, which is why we bring this report today to committee. As a background, the council owned the land, which is a narrow strip adjoining Barker's Lane and is part of the larger holding which the Neil Wade Academy School reside on, which is leased to them on a 125-year lease. The land is not used for educational purposes, and there are no safeguarding or security issues as a result of the proposed disposal. A developer approached both the school and the council regarding the purchase of this land to enable the widening and required improvements to enable access to a site they are looking at developing for up to 130 dwellings, which was considered for outline planning permission by Fenland District Council Planning Committee in October 2024. An independent external valuation of the land was carried out in March 2025, and to note, an existing county council policy agreed at committee in 2016, which is detailed in Appendix 2, notes that any sale of land subject to an academy lease that precedes of such a sale is to be shared on a 50-50 basis between the Academy Trust and the Council, and that falls into this remit. Item 6.2 of the report details that legal colleagues confirms that the proposed disposal meets our statutory duties within Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972 in regard to obtaining best consideration, as well as adhering to the requirements of the Academies Act 2010 in regard to obtaining DFE approval. Therefore, the recommendations is for committee to delegate authority to the Executive Director, Finance and Resources, in consultance with the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee, to complete this disposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Having a look at this, and without talking valuation numbers, I feel that the valuation of this proposal is undervalued compared to the size of development that it will be serving. We're looking at 130 dwellings here, and the sum involved I don't feel is sufficient. But more of the concern to me is that within the statements that we've seen here, we don't seem to have a statement from the position of the schools in the fact of whether they support or object to this. And we have to consider as a council the wider implications beyond the financial gain. There are several negatives, as I see it, involved with this. Where when you look at the geographical position of Neil Wade School, it is arguably a semi-rural location with aspect of agricultural fields to the rear. And with this proposal going forward, it is going to enclose the school and reduce the natural amenity. That alongside of the fact that negative implications to the school with 130 dwellings entering to the side of it is no doubt going to increase traffic flow and no doubt an amount of disruption through the construction phase. So I feel that I would like to see how the school views this proposal. I would also like to know if the field in question, which is for development, has actually been purchased by the developer, because if the field in question has not yet been purchased by the developer, this could be used as a bargaining chip for them to achieve higher value going forward. So in all, I feel that we need far more information to make a decision upon this. Thank you, Chair.
Chris, could you perhaps come back on those points?
Yeah, sure. So just a couple of points you raised. The school has been fully supportive of this. In fact, they were the ones that were engaged with first. So we've worked with them, and they're fully supportive of this proposal that's going forward. The second point around the valuation of this site was carried out by an independent chartered valuer, and that is a criteria that we need to have done anyway, because we will need further DFE approval, and as part of that we have to evidence evaluation of the site within that approval. We have the details of that not included in this pack, but we would be prepared to share that in due course if required. The other point you raised around the land in question for the 130 houses being purchased by the developer, I'm not personally aware of that position. I don't know, Mark, if...
Can you put your microphone on, please? Thanks.
Yeah, our understanding is that they do have control and ownership of that land, so it's not a case of that they have to buy it or it's subject to an option agreement or anything like that. So, yeah, in response to your question, our understanding is that they do already own the land.
Okay, now you need to turn your microphone off. Thank you. So, I mean, and I would also generally say, I mean, your comments go towards planning considerations, which we have no control over here. You know, so this building will go ahead if the district council planning committee involved approves it. So we are concerned here with the sale of that little ransom strip only. I mean, we have no power over the whether the houses get built or not. Councillor Machini.
Thank you. I think I've sort of heard a partial answer to this already, but the one thing I didn't get from the papers on this is what relationship is there actually between the sort of market price and what we're selling for, essentially? Because it's if the two are comparable, because I did read a bit about it being conforming to best value considerations, but it didn't actually say how, and I think you probably have quite a lot of wiggle room. If the price is reasonably good enough, then I don't have a problem. But seeing the details of that would be quite useful, I think. Ransom strips, we know that, I think the chair of this committee has a similar issue in her division. They can be really, really difficult. But if this one has a decent ratio between, what you would expect the land to be worth and what we're getting, then it's completely fine.
Yeah, in response to your question, the Red Book RICS compliant valuation that was done was to the basis of market value, fair value. They're the same. So we're confident that the price we're getting is the full price. And sorry, I'm happy to share a copy of the report with the committee if that would be of benefit, to show how they arrived at that value.
Go ahead.
My concern here is that there are two potential valuations on the land. One is as land, and the other one is as a ransom strip. And as a ransom strip, its value is much greater. May I ask if the valuation was because of a ransom strip?
Yes, certainly the strip of land, if it was just amenity land, if there was no proposal to develop the houses further up Barker's Lane, it would have limited value. But the Red Book valuation that was carried out to market value was on the basis of it being a ransom strip. So it did take full into account the ransom value attributable to that strip of land.
Okay, Councillor Morgan.
I just want to know, you said that it's dependent on getting approval from the Department of Education. Is the payment also dependent on the house builders getting permission for the development, or will they be buying it before? As in, what's the phasing? Are they buying it before they develop the houses? Uh, Basically, if they don't get planning, basically, are they in a binding contract to buy it yet, or if the houses aren't contracted, will they be abandoning their payment?
Yeah, in response, the heads of terms are not conditional on planning, so the housing doesn't have to have been built. There's not a milestone of 50 houses or anything like that until we get payment. The intention is that the transaction would go through, the transfer of the land would happen as soon as approval is provided, and we would only transfer the land to them on receipt of the full payment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haythorne.
This seems quite sensible. I mean, the land, as I understand it, it's currently being farmed at the moment, so the school isn't using it at the moment. And the plans, as I understand them, means that there will be a green area permanently put adjacent to the school. This seems like a good deal as long as the financials stack up, and I'm sure it's good that work is being done to make sure that the best possible value is being achieved for it. But it does seem to be something that would not be of a disadvantage to the school. Is that kind of right?
Yeah, I think the proposal is beneficial both for the county council and the school itself in terms of the financial value. That financial value for the school obviously gives them the opportunity to reinvest in the school and develop the school accordingly. And like you've said, the council would receive a capital receipt. We've currently programmed it into the business planning for 26-27, which is an opportune capital receipt from what was previously planned. So yeah, it's as well as that, irrespective of the planning outcome of the houses, if houses built, then obviously that's a perceived benefit for redevelopment of that location as well.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just draw you to your comment that your understanding is that the developers currently own the field of development. Is that concrete or is that assumption? And in addition to that, have different avenues been explored in terms of granting access over a deed of grant or somewhere of that mechanism for this development, whereby the council would retain that land with a view to the potential of added value in the future should more of those agricultural fields behind the Neil Wade playing fields ever come for development, where income streams could be generated in the future? Thank you.
In response, I mean, we can't be sure. We haven't done a title report on who owns the development site, but certainly the development company have control of it in terms of ownership. We could come back to you and confirm exact details. So it is an assumption, but we're confident that they have control. Ownership is possibly a different question, legal question, that we again could review.
But if I could follow up on that, I don't think if there were more houses or more development, anything more would be done with that land. I mean, it's needed for the current development. It would also be needed for any further development. So there's no sort of extra problem for the developer for that, if they'd build more houses.
Yeah, I mean the subject property or the subject land we're talking about, there's plans for 130 houses on that. There are other owners and developers of land, I think more like 450 houses that has separate access, so they wouldn't be, that was quite clear in the planning discussions that been had, that Barker's Lane would only serve the 130 houses. And answering another point on the benefits, that the developers will still have to enter into Section 106 agreements part of which our education colleagues have been in discussions with them about improvements that they can make to the school and money that they can pay across, together with the open areas of land that they're making available as part of this development of 130 houses.
Yeah, I mean, so it's 5 meters wide and can't remember exactly how long, but they're going to widen the road and improve the junction, right? And so there's no, once that's done, that's it. There's no extra value to be had out of that piece of land.
No, that's correct. Yes, I mean the focus of the report is the ransom strip, which is the land you've just described. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I saw a hand over.
Yeah,
please go
thank you,
ahead.
Chair, and thanks for the report. Yeah, I note some of the comments that have been made. I'm quite comfortable with this, really. I think the recommendations are saying that, you know, ultimately the Chair and the Vice Chair will, and the reason why I say I'm comfortable with it, because I've had experience of these sorts of sites before, and just looking at Google Maps, I don't know the area. You know, I know the school, but I don't know the area. But you know, if we turn this opportunity down, which is ultimately funding for the council and the academy, which is important, we know the pressures on education funding at the moment. But just looking at the map, I can see, you know, off Apple Tree Court, that potentially the developer will just go away and gain an access point from somewhere else if we don't try and facilitate this. So, you know, we could be cutting off our nose to spite our face if we turn this access strip down, because the developer will just go away and gain access from a different point in the area. So that would be my views.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other comments or questions? Right, well, I think we've had a robust debate there. Thank you. So the Assets and Procurement Committee is invited to review and approve the recommended offer received after the recent marketing of the property in accordance with Section 123 of the Local Government Act, and B, delegate authority to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Assets and Procurement Committee to agree on terms to approve the execution of all necessary documentation and complete the disposal of the site. Do we all agree? Okay, so right, does anyone object? Does anyone abstain? 2 abstentions. Is correct. I read out the wrong recommendations. I do apologize. So the recommendation is, the Assets and Procurement Committee is invited to delegate authority to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Asset and Procurement Committee to agree any outstanding terms to approve the execution of all the necessary documentation and complete the disposal of the land. I do apologize. So I'm sure that doesn't change your voting. Right. Okay, so Jenna, it was passed. Thank you. Right, yes. So now we move on to item 5. And again, the appendix to this report is exempt, and we will need to move into confidential session if members wish to discuss it. As before, I'm sure we can discuss this without going into confidential session, but do let me know if you would like to. Can I ask Chris Ramsbottom, Service Director of Property, assisted by Tom Jupp, Surveyor, to present this report, which is on page 31 of your agenda pack.
Thank you, Chair. And as you say, I've got Thomas Jupp, who was the estate surveyor who led this case, aside me for any questions. We bring this report to committee today to consider the disposal of a parcel of land located off Eastria Lane, Whittlesea, as the value of the disposal is above the threshold within the disposal policy, which requires committee approval. We've marketed this land twice. However, the bidder withdrew following the first marketing exercise, so we've been out for a second marketing exercise, and which has enabled, following an evaluation process, a new bid which exceeds the threshold for committee approval to be brought forward today as the preferred bid. The details and evaluation of all bids received are within the confidential Appendix 1. As a bit of background, the land forms part of the County Farms estate and is the remaining plot of what's known as Bassinghalley Farm. The rest of the farm has been sold in phases to a residential developer under an option agreement, which was established in 2008, with sales in 4 different phases in 2014, 2017, 2020 and 2023, for a total capital receipt of £10 million. The last plot was marketed in October 2024. The outcome of the evaluation process recommends the unconditional bid from bidder 8, which, although is a lower financial bid from the same bidder than the alternative conditional bid, when we analyse the conditions, timescales for planning and risks in the conditional bid alongside net present value and analysis of risk assessment, which is covered in more detail within item 6.2 and the confidential Appendix 1, the unconditional bid is the preferred and recommended option as we receive a much needed capital receipt this financial year. Item 3.2 details the consideration and merits we considered of obtaining outline planning permission on the site and the reason why it would not add value to the site. In fact, in doing so, it was felt it may impede the wider market attraction of the site in restricting end use and prospective bidders. Item 6.1 from financial colleagues state that approval today will bring forward an earlier and higher capital receipt than had been planned and projected for within the financial capital receipt plan. Item 6.2 from our legal colleagues confirms that this recommendation meets and fulfils the statutory requirements and duty of section 123 in regard to best consideration. So I ask committee to review and approve the recommended unconditional offer received from bidder 8 and delegate the authority to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources with the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee to agree terms and the completion of the disposal of the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions? Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Chair. Within the valuation that was looked at, was it considered the value of this type of development land is going up in the future or going down in the future?
I think that's a very subjective question open to the market and how the market relates. There is an opportunity for it to do both things going forward. However, I think the offer that we put forward today for our own perspective and the valuation of that site is a very good offer.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. So, broadly speaking, in principle, I don't object to this sale, but just a couple of curious questions. Obviously, the remainder of Bassinghalley Farm was sold off in tranches. It was just curious to know as to why this remaining piece of land remains, and whether there was a strategic plan for it in the earlier days of this development. And also curious to know, obviously we have our in-house This Land Limited, as to why they were not interested to develop this further. And I understand the calculation with risk element as to taking the slightly lower bid without condition. However, the bid with conditions attached is significantly greater. Should we not be seeing an element of risk? Thank you, Chair.
Just to pick up the first point, the rest of the site was sold to a developer under an option agreement. This parcel of land was also part of that, which they declined to take up The second bit was that I'm presuming, and Tom may be able to confirm, that this land did not entertain this for their own business reasons. So that's a requirement we have to ask them first if they're interested, and they chose not to for their own reasons. The latter point around the difference between unconditional and conditional offer, we felt that the conditional offer would put this post-sale back at least 12 months due to the planning requirements that's there and the risk associated with that. During that 12 months, the developer has got the option to walk away, as we know, and the requirement for the council to deliver capital receipts, certainly within this financial year, means that the unconditional offer is a favoured option with a view to completion within 10 to 12 weeks.
Okay, any further questions for anyone? Right, okay, so I shall now read out the recommendation. The right one this time, I hope. The Assets and Procurement Committee is invited to review and approve the recommended offer received after the recent marketing of the property in accordance with Section 123 of the Local Government Act. And B, delegate authority to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Assets and Procurement Committee to agree on terms to approve the execution of all necessary documentation and complete the disposal of the site. Can I have an indication of whether we approve? Thank you. So I see no objections, so we will take, that's been carried unanimously. Okay, so now we move on to item 6. Can I ask Claire Ellis, Head of Procurement and Commercial, to present this report, which is on page 41 of your agenda pack?
Thank you, Chair. This report is regarding the provider selection regime and the Council's requirement to publish an annual report of its operation here. The PSR came into force in January 2024. It is the procurement regime for healthcare related contracts, and it operates very differently from the procurement regimes for all of the other procurements that we run. The 5 required processes that we have to use under provider selection regime are listed at section 2.3. And the other main point to note probably is that there is no requirement, there is no threshold for application of the PSR. So normally under the contract procedures, there are a series of thresholds and different procurement processes apply to those thresholds. The PSR applies from £1 to multi-million pounds. PSR procurements must be assessed using the criteria that are listed at 2.5. Those PSR procurements that the Council has run since it came into force in January 2024 are listed at Appendix 1, and it is those PSR procurements that will be included in the required annual report that must be published. For context, we've provided some case studies at 3.2 just to provide some additional information about what in operation those procurement processes look like. There is some commentary at 3.3 and 3.4 as to the benefits that the PSR has led to since it came into force. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, excellent. So the Assets and Procurement Committee is recommended to approve the annual report for publication. Anyone got any objections? No, so we'll take that as carried unanimously. Right, moving on to item 7 now. Here we go. Claire, can you present this report, which is on page 47 of your pack?
Thank you. This report is the second procurement compliance report that this committee has received. It was agreed last time that I should bring this report quarterly from now on. So as you're aware, the part of the council's constitution is a set of contract procedure rules which must be followed when we are procuring our requirements through third parties. The CPRs also provide for exceptions or waivers, and it did become apparent during the course of the last 12 months that there were breaches occurring which fell outside both the contract procedure rules and the waiver process. So this report summarises the breaches that were reported during the period April to July 2025. And those breaches are listed in the table at 3.1. And again, as per my report last time, those breaches, none of them involved fraud, corruption or financial irregularities. And where the spend was not able to be immediately stopped, we are planning or have procured since the breach was reported. So we are planning a procurement or a procurement has already taken place. The relevant directorates have provided management commentary at 3.5, and we continue to receive and deal with any reports of breaches that are coming in.
Thank you. Anyone with any comments on this one? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to me that it's good that we're bringing this report, and I would be concerned if there weren't any breaches in an organisation this size. That would appear to me more as if we're not identifying them. So I'm glad we're bringing this report. Can I ask what's being done in terms of lessons learned from these breaches, and that we're making sure we are doing a full assessment and preventing them from happening in the future?
Yeah, so we are where a team is responsible for a breach, we are my team is conducting procurement training with that team, and what we're also doing is kind of doing a bit of a wider learning with that team to make sure that there aren't other breaches occurring within their spend. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Nessinger.
Thank you. The first thing I want to say is thank you very much to Claire for all the work that's been going on into this process, a process which I know is probably somewhat onerous to individuals in Patrick and Martin's teams sometimes. But it is a really important process for this council to be able to control its spending and make sure that the contracting that we are doing is for the right value and is properly managed. I want to say how important it is that we do that, and particularly looking at some of the management explanation in the Children, Families and Adults around overspending on existing contracts and spot purchasing. I think we all know how difficult the situation is in Children's, Families and Adults and the pressure that those teams are under. But it is also important to recognise that this council at the moment has a massive overspend problem, and we need to make sure that we're getting the council's finances back on track, which they're not at the moment. And this process is a huge part of that. So thank you for the report, Claire. I'm sorry that it's tedious and hard work, but I think it's important that councillors get this report and that we recognise how important the kind of controls on spending that this is putting in place are. So I just wanted to say that at this moment. Thank you.
Michael, I believe you wanted to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say this is part of an ongoing continual improvement within the council, particularly over the last 5 years under Claire's leadership around the improvement in procurement and commercial. Given the financial position and the ongoing challenges that the council faces, we set up a financial transparency panel, which I chair, and we set that up earlier this year. Through that work, we have done data mining and interrogation reports that have brought more to light. We are amongst only a handful of councils that openly report this position to be able to take that learning forward. The commitment to the last committee was to bring this as a regular item, hence why you see it again here, that part of the learning. What we are pleased to see is that the value, and I agree with Councillor Clark in terms of an organisation of this size and this complexity, and given the legacy and length of some of the procedures and practices that's gone on, it's inevitable that we will have these arise. But what I'm pleased to see is that the number of those and the value of those is decreasing, and what you see before you is an improvement on what we saw at the last committee, and hopefully that will continue, and therefore we're picking these up, and as Claire said, then going through with training. And what I would also draw council's attention to is, it is taken seriously and reported to the corporate leadership team. We have two of the exec directors and service director here, reflecting the seriousness in which this is taken, and those lessons are then taken through into the directorate management teams, and any other further reporting, we have that dialogue at the corporate leadership team level.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Anyone else? Councillor Machini.
Thank you. This was very useful, and I think for the clarity of anyone listening, this probably should be called the being held over a barrel report. I mean, the way I understand it is when, we do things that we're obliged to do, they're statutory services, and, some legal contract clause ending does not allow us to stop providing the thing. And therefore you carry on in sort of murky circumstances. And I think it's actually quite a good thing that we sort of take these things head on and have a look at them. One of the things that I would like to understand is there are quite a few, I mean, I'm hoping we can fix the sort of statutory advertising contract, because that sounds like it should be able to be fixed. And one of my questions would be, when you do fix it, what difference does it make to the money and why? Because I think this is important for us to understand, so we're entering into this other set of conditions, and this will allow the contract to be worth X rather than Y or whatever. What difference does that actually make? Because it will allow us to understand these things better going forward, in terms of what they mean. The other thing that I would like to understand is whether there's any way that we can, going back to the point about learning, I see a lot of actions that essentially amount to we have to award sort of sole trader status or something, or we basically have to apply for a waiver because we can't do anything else about this. And I was wondering, is there anything we can do to change that situation, or are we unable to do anything about it, essentially? Because this is all people that are external to us, I guess. Does my question make sense?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Patrick Warren Higgs. I'm the Exec Director for Adults Health and Commissioner at the Council. I think your point is that when we award to a sole trader, we need to provide sufficient evidence and robustness that there is a sole trader, because sometimes it can be considered it's the easier route just to award direct and say there's nobody else in the market. And that was the case on the example that Claire talked about in section 3.1. It's the last item, which is around some training. And there was lots of challenge from Claire and other colleagues about why, if you only providing this to this one organisation, is there others? So we did a market testing exercise, and actually there was only one provider, because it was so intrinsically linked to the product that they sell that they'd almost got the monopoly on the market, and therefore there was nobody else to do it. So we went through that process. So I think the learning from that exercise and from other breaches is that we need to provide sufficient evidence, and the paper presented here today is one of those aspects of evidence. The other bit is around our contract register and our procurement pipelines, which is all supported by Claire and the team, to make sure that we are aware of when contracts are coming to an end and that we're giving ourselves sufficient notice and preparation time in order to be able to test the market, whether that's through a sole supplier or through a much more free market where we are going through those stages.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Wells.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, it's very helpful actually. But I just want to pick up on probably for you, Martin, question for you, child contact services. You know, I've just got a little bit of concern. Obviously, it's a very important service, but sorry, I'll just give you for reference, page 50, the first bar 25015 it is. You know, obviously this was a procurement led by Peterborough City Council, which was failed to award. But I just want to try and understand, without putting you on the spot, the context of, you know, we're in 2025 now. It's 2021 when this was potentially failed to award, and has it been left to run? You know, who was responsible for that budget? And not wanting to blame the fingers, but you know, I just need to understand the detail that sits behind that, please.
Yeah, that's fine. So we have our own child contact service, family time service, which actually does the vast majority of our contact arrangements for children that are in our care to meet with their family, their parents and siblings. Where our service is unable to provide it for whatever operational reason that may be, we have used an alternative provider. Now, that provider was the same provider that was part of the procurement process back then, but because we don't use them consistently, we use them on an ad hoc basis. People have been using them outside of the procurement rules. That's how that has happened. So they don't have a long-term contract with us. They're not a uniform provider, but they do fill in ad hoc arrangements, which have amounted to quite a lot of money, because there is a lot of, we've got 700 odd looked after children in our care. So there's quite a lot of contact arrangements which need to be made. So we will be going through the procurement process to make sure that breach is rectified, and that any provider, we use a number of providers, but any provider that we use for additional family time support will have to go through that process. So that will cease now. So hopefully that will rectify the breach and prevent any future spend on that. But that's how that's happened. It's been topping up on an ad hoc basis.
Thank you. And just following up from that, Martin, thanks, very helpful. I guess, can you give assurances that this, you know, this is one part of the service, child contact services? You know, are we happy and content that this hasn't run away in other places within your directorate?
There are a number of things on this report, and there have been on previous reports, where there have been breaches for children's education and families. I wanted to add on to what Claire was saying earlier. What I can reassure everyone is that we take this extremely seriously. It is a priority for us to make sure that breaches, A, don't happen, and when they do happen, that they're rectified quickly, swiftly, and appropriately. So the transparency, the financial transparency information that Michael referred to earlier, that comes directly to my leadership team, and we go through that on a line-by-line basis together, so that we are transparent within our own service about where things are working well, but where there are breaches. We share the learning to prevent future breaches, and where we can cease making spend on a breached contract, then we will do. Where it's unavoidable, we will work as quickly as we can to make that breach rectified by, you know, going through the procurement process, making a pseudo DPS, as we did with the adoption and fostering therapeutic support. So we're also going through the process of making sure that all of our contract managers have completed the relevant commissioning and procurement training that Claire already mentioned. So I hope that we can continue to see the volume and the value of these breaches reduce over time. As Michael said, it would be lovely if we could get to a zero position, but in the reality, in a large organisation, as we've already reflected, that might not happen. But we've certainly seen consistent improvement so far, and you've got a total commitment from me and my leadership team to make sure that continues.
Councillor Machini.
I'm so sorry, I don't want to make this longer than it needs to be, but it kind of goes back to the point I made initially, which is, for us, for our understanding, I think it would be very useful to understand to what extent, when you've got a breach that you're trying to rectify, And, you know, I agree. I don't think you can realistically expect ever to get to zero, but there would be a very easy way, I suppose, to get to zero, which is you're going to take all your contracts and you're going to rewrite them exactly to fit what you're doing right now. So we're now making a rule that says this is compliant, and that's the end of it. To what extent are we trying to do that? And to what, because sometimes you do have to, you know, contract in relation to what you see outside of you, you know, you can't. But to what extent are you also sort of actively finding ways of doing things that are actually maybe easier, cheaper, and they're easier to sort of make sure that we comply? Because this is the bit that in all of this list, which essentially basically says, you know, we've got a procurement exercise in place and this will rectify the breach. How different will the service and the value for money be at the end of the breach rectification? Do you see the question?
Do you want to come in? I'll start if that's okay. Yeah. So I am hopeful that the training that they're doing will make sure that people are more aware of of how breaches happen. So I'll give you an example of the adoption and fostering one. That was a number of small low value contracts being awarded to providers that would have fallen below the procurement process, but they were awarded on different families to the same provider. So the value increased on different small level contracts, but no one was tracking that individual spend. So it's quite easy to see how it happens. I'm hopeful that raising training and awareness of the new procurement rules will make sure that that does reduce over time. Yeah, like I said, I think it's quite easy to see how people do that when they're in a hurry and trying to get the right services in for the children as quickly as possible. But raising awareness and training will hopefully counteract that.
Yeah, and I think I would just follow up on that. I think there's the procurement processes are, for the main part, based around competition. So we would hope that we get high quality bids for the best price possible when we compete them formally through the Procurement Act or provider selection regime or public contract regulations. So we may not see a huge impact in terms of price, but we might do, and we can certainly, you know, follow that through on a couple of case examples. But also we've got formal contracts in place as a result of procurement, which means that we can actively monitor and manage performance much better, which I think is a you know, an added bonus to doing the procurement properly.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. I think I will try and keep this very brief as well, but I think maybe what Councillor Moschini was, I'm sorry if I've just butchered your name as well, I might have been alluding to as well as that obviously it's very good that we're reducing the amount of contractual breaches, but how do we know that, for example, that the contracts we are signing are fit for purpose? And obviously we're having training for that, but like how do we know that we're asking for the right things on our contract as well, so that they're delivering the right things, even if we're putting them out to competitive markets, so that we get the right things delivered to us?
So procurement documents, generally speaking, are they're a team effort. So they involve members from my team who understand procurement law and how to run an effective procurement. They involve commissioners from the service area who understand the service that needs to be delivered and how that ought to be delivered and performance managed. And they involve a Pathfinder legal representative who drafts the contract in a way that enables both the procurement requirements to be delivered and the service area requirements to be delivered.
Is there any way of tracking when we have contracts that are statutory correct but are delivering the wrong outcomes? Do we have any sort of reviews of those kind of events for learning?
So from an adult's perspective, we have a contract brokerage team. So they broker the services that are required from the contracts, and then we have contract management. There's a number of KPIs, so key performance indicators within the contract that we'll monitor. So we have regular monitoring. A lot of our services are also under the auspices of a regulator. So the Care Quality Commission oversees, so we work closely with the Care Quality Commission. And also we work with people who use those services and their families. So we get a lot of rich information about the quality of the service and also whether or not that service is meeting the requirements of the contract. And where necessary, we'll either pause or suspend placements while we deal with the improvements in the contract. So placements won't be made or services won't be procured, or we'll take it to, ultimately it can go to a breach of contract discussion. But what we try and do is use that learning to both improve the contract during the period of time that it's in operation. And then when we come to a re-tender process, we're using all that information to understand what does if we are re-tendering, what does it look like? How do we want to change it so that it much more aligns to the needs of our service? But a lot of that is based upon what's in the contract, but also it's based upon the rich information we get, the qualitative information we get from people who draw on that service or their families.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so the Assets and Procurement Committee is asked to note the content of this report. So I see no objections, so we'll take that as carried. And we move on to item 8, which is the agenda plan and training plan and appointments. Would the Democratic Services Officer update us on any changes to the published report, please?
Yes, thank you. There will be no committee meeting in October, therefore the investment portfolio report will be moved to the November meeting. Regarding the training plan, the corporate property training has been scheduled for the 28th of November and those invites have been sent out. And there are no updates to report on the appointments to outside bodies nor internal advisory groups.
Thank you. So it is recommended that the Assets and Procurement Committee review its agenda plan attached to Appendix 1, review its training plan attached to Appendix 2, review the appointments to outside bodies as detailed in Appendix 3, and D, review the appointments to the internal advisory groups and panels as detailed in Appendix 4. Not seeing any objections, so we will take that as carried unanimously. So, members, that is the final item on today's agenda. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 18th of November at 10 a.m. I declare this meeting closed. Thank you all very much.